Welcome to the Portland Film Festival 2020, presented for the fourth consecutive year by Comcast. A big thank you to them and the Comcast team for their support and commitment to independent filmmaking. Their ongoing support ensures that diverse voices are given a platform to share their unique outlook on the world and the lives that we live. Also, a thank you to Kerner Camera, Cleaner Path, SAG-AFTRA, Plumtree Mortgage, and Oregon Film. For more information, you can go to pdxff.com. My name is Andrew Call. I am a volunteer for Portland Film Festival. I'm here with Roko Belic and Joe Phelps of the film Trust Me. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Joe Phelps, chairman and founder of Getting Better Foundation, who financed this film and helped with the production. And over to Roko for you. This should be an interesting discourse if you keep asking Roko questions.
I'm not sure what that means, Joe. My name is Roko Belic. I directed the film Trust Me. I've been making documentaries for over 25 years, and this is an amazing adventure to be on, making this film.
Roko, how did you get into? Sorry, how did you get into documentary making?
You know, I watched a lot of TV growing up, and at the behest of my mom. So when I was growing up, TV was called the boob tube, and people of culture, I should say, looked down on TV as something negative and a time suck. But my mom recognized that at least on PBS, on public television, there was lots of really high quality educational programming. And there were times where she would literally stop me from doing my homework so I could come in and watch a program that she thought would be worth it. Because this was before video recording was easy. And so I saw incredible programs growing up my whole life, and it really felt like a window to the world for me. And by the time I was a teenager, I think I had a much broader worldview than most of my friends, partly because I have foreign parents, and partly because of watching documentaries on TV since as early as I can remember. And that led directly to my first film, which is I saw a documentary when I was 15 years old about an eccentric American physicist wanting to go to Siberia, to this weird eclectic place that sounded fascinating to me as a teenager. That physicist is named Richard Feynman. He died before he was able to go, and I made it my mission at that point in my life to make it there someday. And in fact, the first film I ever made professionally, I filmed in Siberia in a place called Tuva, as a direct result of that quest from seeing that documentary.
Okay, so with that, why did you decide to choose to make this film, Trust Me, about media literacy and misinformation? How'd you get into this project?
Sure. Joe and I didn't know each other before this project, but a colleague of Joe's named Hank Shaw was looking around with Joe for somebody to direct a film or a series of short films dealing with information and media. And Joe can give you the background on that, but I didn't decide to do it. It was Joe's idea, and when he told it to me, it immediately sounded like something that A, needed to get made, and B, something that would fascinate me enough that I could sink myself into it, as I have done with my other projects. So, you know, making a film is a huge commitment in terms of your time and energy. And this is something that was a no-brainer. As soon as I heard it, I said, this needs to be done. It's fascinating. I want to do it.
Did it just spark that curiosity of like, yes, let's get into this?
Yeah, yeah.
So Joe, will you talk about how you got into starting this project and working? Was it with your foundation, Getting Better Foundation?
Yeah, in the early 90s, I noticed how on the front page of the LA Times, the people would talk about one murder in Compton more so than they would talk about when David Geffen gave $100 million. and you know, and crime. There's in 1967 when I graduated high school, there were about 300 murders in LA County. Now hold on to your hat. This year there will be about 300 murders in LA County. So the incidence of crime is significantly decreased. The incidence of poverty, people are coming out of poverty every day. Healthcare is better. When you look at the major things in life that make our life better, more comfortable, and whatever, it's better than it ever was. But you go out on the street and you talk to people, and they think crime is rampant. They don't let their kids walk to school. They don't talk to their neighbors as much. That and there's and Pew has some research that is saying that over time, trust is actually falling between people. And people's trust in the government and that sort of thing. So it's a matter of frustration. I wanted to tell people, hey, look at the data. Don't look at the headlines kind of thing. And so as I was aging and sold some property and so forth, I started getting Better Foundation. And we want this documentary to be our calling card. We want to raise awareness of the need for media literacy in the same way that an inconvenient truth raises the awareness for the need to help climate change. So, you know, you can't convince people with data. You got to tell them personal stories and reach their emotions and so forth. I learned that from 40 years in advertising. And I saw Happy, and that's a documentary that had some good success that Roko put together, and saw that I really like the way he interviews people, the way he puts interviews together to tell a story. And so I went to Roko, and he'll tell you that it probably took him 3 years to put Happy together. And we did this film in, I think, was it 14 months? Was that 14 months, Roko?
I think so.
Yeah.
Just about.
And
for a year.
Yeah, and you watch the credits and you look at the number of pieces of film footage that we had to license and fact check and so forth. So there was considerable time spent on interviews, case histories in New Zealand, India, Washington, D.C., L.A., Durango, San Francisco. There was a lot of shooting, really. But then on the other hand, there was I think a lot more archival footage and legal work than we thought about in the beginning. I think we're happy with the film, and people that see us are, you know, your friends will pat you on the back, and you kind of have to be careful about what you're going to believe. But the feedback's good, and so I'm thinking we have a good product here.
So with this film on that, what would you like people to view this to take away from it?
I would like for them to understand, you know, first comes facts, then thoughts, then emotions, and you know, at some point you change people's beliefs and their behaviors. And I would like to move the pendulum one iota, you know, towards people understanding what the world is really like, as opposed to what it looks like when they spend too much time viewing the news and reading the wrong articles.
Yeah, so a shift, like a conscious shift in perspective of society.
That's a much shorter way to say it. Thank you, Andrew.
Roko, with making this, were there pockets in it where it completely changed how you're viewing society?
Yes. So one of the things that excited me about Joe's proposal for the film is that it wasn't just about the idea that the world is actually better than most people think.
Yeah.
You know, news is designed in a way to show us what's wrong, and some people criticize that and other people say, well, that's how society gets better. We fix problems. We don't have to report on all of the wonderful mothers who feed their kids every morning and take them to school, or all the wonderful fathers who teach their kids how to ride bikes, or whatever it is. Those are not newsworthy. And so news has this negativity bias. And what Joe really helped me think about is what that does to all of our psyches and our understanding of the world that we live in, and how that can have a really negative impact on our ability to cooperate because we trust each other in order to solve the problems that really do exist. There's all kinds of problems still. And even if the crime rate is the same, in terms of the gross crime rate or murder rate in LA, we still want to make it better. We still want to fix it. We still want there to be less crime. And in order to do that, you have to trust each other. Society has to have an infrastructure, a social infrastructure where people trust each other, trust the institutions like the police, for example, or the teachers, or the businesses in your community, in order to solve those problems. So I had not thought of these things as clearly as I started to, once Joe presented the film to me, the project, and I started really digging in. And it kind of sucked me in like a vortex, because I have a couple of kids. I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old, and they're growing up in a completely different world than me. And I realized that in some ways they're very privileged compared to the way I grew up. And in other ways, they're much more vulnerable or susceptible to this fragmentation of society, whether it's, there's so many conflicts happening in society, and there's so many people focused on the things that make us separate, whether it's your economic standing, your race, your gender identity. These are all valid and true. However, the things that unite us, the fact that all of us want our kids to be healthy and safe, the fact that all of us would rather be alive than dead, the fact that all of us would rather have what we need than not have what we need. All these unifying agents are not front and center in the news, and yet my kids are growing up in a world where that's on the back burner so much that people don't realize that 95% of who I am is the exact same as who you are, Andrew, and I just met you.
Right.
But I just know that you want to make the world better. I know that you don't want to make the environment worse. You don't want to kill innocent people or animals. You don't want to, you don't think there should be a greater separation between rich and poor. I just know these things about you just because you're a human being, not because I know anything about you. And that these commonalities are something that we get to explore, or we get to dig under, to start to understand why are we not perceiving it this way. And that to me is as important as it gets in this age.
Yeah. And while making the film, did that bring you more connectivity to humans, closer to other people? Because you had that, like, we're all in this together. We're all trying to make life better.
Yeah, I've always felt that we're all in this together,
Yeah.
and I say that because I backpacked around the world when I was 20, and I met a lot of people, and I met a lot of poor people in a lot of countries where I didn't speak the language. And there's so few negative instances I had in an entire year. I mean, I literally can recall one instance where I had a negative interaction. Every other interaction, somebody was helping me, giving me directions, telling me where I could stay for cheap, telling me where there's a good place to eat. So I've always believed that we're all in this together. This has shown me how vulnerable that sense is, and how, even though that's most of our natural state, because a human being is a social animal, so we tend to feel connected to our families and our groups of friends and our communities, and hopefully maybe even a wider spectrum of humanity. Working on this film has shown me how you can drive a wedge. We are manipulatable in a negative way, and it's very fragile. And we tell a story in our film where somebody lost his life because somebody drove that wedge into a community, spread a rumor that led to the death of an innocent person. And when I heard that, I knew we had to put it in, because that's what's at stake.
Yeah. And when you talk about the reasoning behind, because you break it down to roughly around like 5 different stories around the world. What was the reason behind
It would have been too short if there was fewer,
that?
long if there was more. Yeah.
Just throw it in there.
Well, there's a natural flow. There's a natural
Yeah.
attention span and a flow. And generally in documentaries, for me, and I think Joe will attest that we had this same exact challenge on this one. There's always so much more good stuff to put in that you just can't fit. So you're constantly weeding stuff out. I mean, we have hundreds of hours of footage. We have dozens of hours of footage from our expert interviews, and we got to use a few minutes of each of those. So that's really always the challenge is what gets to stay, because there's so much good stuff.
There were just so many different issues that the lack of media literacy affect, from anti-vaccine to foreign interference in our government to then the scientific, the mental negativity biases and confirmation biases. So there are a lot of different issues that it touches. And as we get feedback from different people, we find that different people remember different things about the film. I think everyone remembers the deep fakes, and that surprises more people than I think anything else in the film. It's also less debatable. So yeah, lots of issues.
So to go with attention span in our society seems to be becoming shorter and shorter. How do you think that will play on society in the long term, of people taking the time to actually find sources that do rely on fact instead of misinformation?
Well, our ultimate goal is to reach the youth, but you wouldn't think that you would do that with a 90-minute documentary. So usually, youth actually helps affect change. When it was the Vietnam War, it was a youth out in the street, and Black Lives Matter, it's a youth out in the street. But with media literacy, it doesn't seem to be that way. It's more like an insidious kind of illness. It's creeping through society, and that they don't really realize how it's affecting them mentally and so forth. So we're trying to, with the 90-minute documentary, which takes a long attention span, we're reaching the higher socioeconomic groups that can actually help affect change with budgets and so forth in Washington, D.C. And those people are also teachers, and they can share what they learn with others. And then we have broken it up into 15 different segments to make it classroom friendly. So you might have a 5-minute piece on confirmation bias and a 2-minute piece on deep fake and that sort of thing. And that's all the spark that's needed in a classroom to get a good conversation going. So as Roko said, we have a lot of footage to choose from, and we're going to be doing 15-second, 20-second blips to use on social media and so forth. So yeah, the media has to be right to reach the right target. This over 65-year-old target is also a real problem. That Princeton and New York Times research showed that they are the most egregious when it comes to sharing misinformation. So we're trying to make deals with corporations to help us get to that target. Roko?
Yeah, I amen. I second everything you said, Joe.
Oh, okay. So I didn't put you to sleep. Okay, good deal.
Not at all. Not at all.
So, Roko, at the beginning of the film, you have a quote. Who's the quote by?
Well,
Relish.
I made it up.
It's like,
We were trying to
see?
we we had a bunch of we looked up a quote that was great, that was from Leonardo da Vinci,
Yeah.
and in our fact checking process, we heard maybe he's not the one who said it, and it gave me an idea that often when we see a quote, whether it's from Mark Twain, which was one, it was attributed to Mark Twain as well. Um, we often we associate a meaning with the person who said it. In other words, if Martin Luther King said something, it means something different than if Adolf Hitler said the exact same thing. And of course, a lot of us do have this, you know, say the same thing, but the context, the you could change the meaning of those exact same words just by who said it. And so that's what gave us the idea to change the byline in that opening quote. But we got a quote that we passed it around the group for weeks to figure out what is the essence of what our movie says. And the idea that the world you see is shaped by the information you receive was pretty much right on point. You know, we don't
Yeah.
think of that. We think of the world as being a factual, objective place that we as individuals come and respond to and live in. But in fact, we're all living in a slightly different world because the world that we experience is filtered through our own personal um, senses and our perceptions. And we all have biases, whether we like it or not, whether we want to or not, whether we work on eliminating our biases or not, we still have biases. The fact that I speak English as a first language is a bias. So it shapes the way I think. Same with you, you know, where we grew up. So that's the kind of thing we were getting at with that opening quote.
Yeah, you know, we could have done your perception is your reality. That says the same thing, and we could have done it in 6 different languages. That's, you know, that's another. So yeah,
So
who
with
said who said if I'd have known I was going to live this long, I would have treated my body better? Was it Joe Walsh? Was it you know, was it Leon Russell? I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was some old rocker, but yeah, same kind of deal.
Andrew, what Joe is expressing right now is what a great creative collaborator he was. And I have done films on my own, completely on my own. I've done them with my brother or with friends, and I've done them in a situation like this where there was an executive producer who was kind of in charge. And Joe has been a wonderful collaborator because he understands the creative process. And one of the key ingredients of Joe being a great collaborator is that he's open. He's open, and I like to be open. I aspire to be open. So whenever an idea came, whoever it came from, we were open. We considered it. We would think about it and let it sit there before we shot it down. And that was a really interesting process because it meant that we got to explore a lot, and nobody felt disempowered. And sometimes in the creative process, there's a hierarchy, and it's very clear. And because somebody's the director, it's whatever they say, or because somebody's the executive producer, it's whatever they say. And we didn't have that, and that made it a really fun experience, which is great.
Thank you, thank you. And after 40 years of working in the advertising business with a lot of prima donna art directors and writers who was like, I'm the writer and you're the suit and that kind of shit. It was so refreshing to work with Roko because he truly was open and he, you know, you would say something and he wouldn't just, you wouldn't combat it right away. You might think about it and then later you do whatever you really wanted to do. And oh, that was okay because that made me realize, okay, he really believes in it. So better let him go with this one. He's made more movies than you have. So yeah.
Thank you, Joe.
Sure.
Before we end this thing, any other plans for the future with movies you're working on or ideas that are sparking you, Roko?
I've got a list of 20 things. I've got one project in particular, but Joe and I have talked about this before, that when you're done with a movie, you're only halfway done with the process, and
Right.
getting the movie out there and showing it at the Portland Film Festival and showing it in private screenings and joining forces with teachers and media literacy groups is something we're really focused on. And I guess I just want to mention that if anybody is watching this who has an idea of a place where they want to show this, or an audience they want to show it to, whether it's your classroom or your kids' classroom or your colleagues at work or your church or your synagogue, anywhere, please let us know. We have a website called trustmedocumentary.com, and there's all the information you need. And if you don't find the information there, just email us. There's a contact form there, and you can let us know, because the audience is what makes a movie a movie. You know, imagine we could spend a year or 2 or 5 years making a movie, and if nobody sees it, it's kind of useless. So we really encourage people who want to show the film to let us know how we can help facilitate you showing the film to whoever you want to.
Right. And search is so important. And there have been so many books and movies and so forth called Trust Me. Just remember, this is trustmedocumentary.com. Trustmedocumentary.com. Thanks.
What's the website, Joe?
Trustmedocumentary.com.
And you can also go to gettingbetterfoundation.org.
You could do that, and there would be similar but different messages. Yeah.
But go to trustmedocumentary.com.
Please do.
This is such a fantastic film. It's terrifying, but I think it's such a necessary film. So I'm so glad you guys made it.
Thank you, Andrew.
And
Thank you.
As soon as I finished it, first thing I did was try to find who did the quote. I still don't believe it was you, Roko. I think you're lying about that too.
Well, it's actually, you bring up a good point, which is I was sure I would find that quote, and I'm sure somebody else said it because it's such a normal thing, you know.
Yeah.
And it was inspired by these other quotes that were attributed to Da Vinci, you know,
Sure.
and Mark Twain. So yes, it gets at a message that hopefully is interesting, and it hooked you. So that's great. Thanks, Andrew.
For sure.
Okay.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, and thank you, Portland Film Festival, and most importantly, the people that are watching these movies and supporting independent film. Remember to vote. You can also go to the virtual lobby at pdxff.com. So thank you so much, Roko and Joe.
Thank you, Andrew.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Yes, pleasure. All right, that's the interview.
There we go. We did it.
We did it. My first.
Yes. Andrew, that's
okay.
Did you come up with anybody who did you find some candidates for who said that quote? Because I couldn't find it. I Google searched.
Nothing.
Yeah. Isn't that
Well,
weird?
it was mostly just nonsense because, you know, our computers have algorithms, so it's just stuff connected to me. I'm like, that's not close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's a great quote. And then it starts scrolling. I'm like, okay.
Right.
That's so perfect.
You're like something, you're like, wait a second, who actually said it? Bugs Bunny didn't say that.
And maybe the way search is, at some point you might search that quote and find that Bugs Bunny said it, you know?
You're going to shift that?
Because it could pick it up from the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andrew, thank you. If there's anything else we could do, let us know.
Thank you so much, guys.
Awesome.
It's our pleasure. Bye-bye.
Enjoy the rest of your day.